Colossalcon North 2024. This is in the Kalahari Resort in Wisconsin. They have a bunch of conventions. I've only been to this specific one. This actual convention area was used by Daisho Con for many years. I did go to Daisho Con back in 2016 or so, and maybe before that a few times, but it's been a while for me, so it's nice to check it out again. I didn't actually attend the convention itself, so I don't have any idea of how that was. Maybe this year, we'll see. Yeah, I just went there impromptu on a whim. It was nice weather, which is really the main reason I go there or don't go there. If it's snowing, no thanks. But it was very nice weather considering it's November in northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin. Yeah, that's really the main reason I'll go or not go. With the camera equipment that I was using, the Nikon Z5 as usual with the Nikon Z 40mm f2 lens. It's a nice cost-effective combination, especially these days with how expensive camera equipment is getting. I wouldn't say the Z5 is perfect. Autofocus is not amazing, but as long as you take enough photos, you set up the camera properly, it should be pretty decent. This time I was using a minimum shutter speed of 1/160th of a second. Usually I was using 125th of a second, so that little additional minimum shutter speed does help out. I move around quickly, I take photos fast, I don't want to waste a person's time. So in that case, a higher minimum shutter speed is ideal. I'm using face and eye detect autofocus and continuous, and I also have focus priority rather than release priority for that continuous focus. As usual with cosplay photography, I tap on the screen a lot because it's not really going to do face detect amazingly well if they have a mask on or very elaborate makeup. The camera does have stabilization, but when you're taking a photo of a person, it's not something that you should consider. I do have that on, but still, shutter speeds are the main thing to consider when you're doing this type of photography with a person. At the time of this convention, I was using version 1.43 firmware on the Z5. There is a newer firmware than that, but I do think that helped out a little bit with autofocus, and I actually updated the firmware of the lens itself to 1.10. Now, and all the information on that, it doesn't say anything was improved, but I do think the newer firmware helped out this combination of equipment. Not to say there were no issues. I did have a few blurry photos here and there. Doing hallway cosplay photography is very challenging. I would suggest considering using your own lighting, but again, I do things quick and I don't really want to flash people a lot with those lights. So it's kind of a give and take with quality of the photos, consistency of the photos, and considering more equipment, considering the downsides of each thing. I have done photography with flash in the past, but it's been a long time. Maybe eventually I'll consider it again. But if you do want more consistency, consider using your own lighting. With the hotel, the arcade, it's very, very mixed lighting. That's the real challenge for me. White balance in post is always a long, intensive hassle to deal with, but natural light does have its benefits in look, as long as you can get the white balance corrected properly. With the arcade, there's a really large skylight, and that works out well for that area, so I would tend to prefer taking photos in there in the daytime. And there's a lot of interesting stuff in the background, so I really do prefer the arcade area for taking snapshot photos. And in general, the upper level of the arcade is really cool. I like sitting in that area, get some cheese curds or something at the bar and hang out. And then you have that really large opening to look down on the lower level of the arcade. It's a really nice area. With the arcade, I do need to adjust things occasionally with exposure compensation and aperture priority because of the bright lights and such from arcade machines. Obviously, you can also use manual mode if you want, but I prefer the simplicity of aperture priority. I try to take multiple photos of each cosplayer or group for various reasons. As I mentioned with the autofocus, consistency isn't perfect with this combination, so I do try to take enough photos to deal with that. And I've never had an issue where I didn't have a single photo that was decent. People could be blinking, especially with groups, things like that. And if you do take photos of groups, have an aperture that makes sense for that. Don't use your maximum aperture like f1.8 or something unless you have to. I do tend to just leave it sometimes, so there could potentially be people that are visibly out of focus in a group photo with a large aperture. I don't really mind it, but ideally you're going to step back a little bit. Also change your aperture to a larger number so it decreases the size of the aperture. You're going to have more depth of field. Sometimes I do switch off of who I'm focusing on in group photos. That way they'll be focused one or two You could potentially combine them if you really wanted to. I'll give them the option, and then I'll release both of them. That way they can have a photo that's focused on them, and the other one can have one as well, because there can be a pretty big difference if you're relatively close to the cosplayers. I did embrace the Dutch angles a little bit. It's kind of a joke in the cosplay photographer scene using Dutch angles, but sometimes it is beneficial. In the case with the large props, I want to get the whole prop in there, but I'm limited on space or something. I might adjust the camera to angle it. Yeah, it's not ideal, but sometimes it works out okay. Posing of cosplayers can be a challenge. I generally just let them do their thing. I will suggest adjustments, especially if they do some type of martial arts pose. Those tend to not work amazingly well with photos. Overall, a very nice convention. Maybe this year I'll try to get a badge and check out the actual convention itself. We'll see. Depends on the weather. I really don't want to go there in snow, like I said. Anyways, hope you enjoyed the photography of Colossalcon North 2024. Scott Photography Bonsai, thanks.